The second 6 chapters are about bhakti, and the last 6 chapters are about jnana. It's not like a, you know, and when you categorize things, there's a principle that's used oftentimes called MECE. MECE, M-E-C-E, MECE. Things should be mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive. What's mutually exclusive means? When you categorize things, they should be mutually exclusive. What does that mean? Yeah.
The items in one category can't go into any other category.
There you go, mutually exclusive. This is pretty simple English. Hidden, are you getting lost here? Are you guys getting lost? Mutually exclusive. They are completely discrete. If it goes in one category, it won't fit in the other. If you go left, are you going right? If you go up, are you going down? Mutually exclusive. And comprehensively exhaustive. What's that mean, Dalen? It's a problem. You guys aren't able to think quickly. Comprehensively exhaustive. What's it mean, Julia? It's like disturbing. You guys can't. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. Comprehensive, you know what that word means? Exhaustive, you know what that word means? You put them together, then you have a compound. What's comprehensively exhaustive mean? No. Comprehensively exhaustive. We're talking about what? A principle which is used when you're doing what? When you're categorizing things. Therefore, your statement about what comprehensively exhaustive means should be in how it's used in terms of categorizing things, in terms of how it's used in taxonomizing things. You skip that. That was your problem. You have to pay attention. When I ask you a question, you can't forget the question during the answer. It's like, I mean, it's literally just, 30 seconds of memory. But you have to store those items in your memory. What's it mean to be comprehensively exhaustive as it relates to systems of categorization? Atulya. Hitten.
Everything that relates to that category is within that section.
That would be covered by mutually exclusive. Because everything fits into a mutually exclusive category means the things in those categories only belong in those categories and no others. Comprehensively exhaustive. You guys are killing me here. I know you know the answer because you raised your hand right away. Problem is nobody else can give an answer. What's the answer, Howard? By the way, I do this for you guys because you have to wake up, because I can't teach the Gita until you wake up. And you guys come in here and you're not awake. It's clear. Nobody's awake. I feel like I'm waking children from their afternoon nap and they're groggy. That's what it feels like talking to you. Yes. I know you know the answer because you messed up the last one. You're embarrassed, so your brain turned on. Anybody else besides Shri? Yes.
Put together, they cover the entire...
Boom. Perfect. Exhaustive means complete, right? Comprehensively exhaustive means when you put them all together, comprehensively, when you put them all together, it's exhaustive. There's nothing else that remains to be categorized. Therefore, it's like you have fauna and flora, plants and animals. You follow? I guess then you also have bacterium, right? But you're looking for, when you put together all your categories, there's nothing left that doesn't fit neatly into one category that exists. Mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive. It's pretty simple. Is it simple? What does that have to do with what I'm talking about? This requires slightly more memory.
The 3 portions of the Gita.
Look at this. What's your first language?
Hindi.
Why is it that somebody where Hindi is their first language, and it's clear that Hindi is their first language, is smarter than all of you? I mean, the questions I'm asking are, practically speaking, they're for like any English-speaking person should be able to answer them. I think with a junior high school level of education, if you're paying attention. Were you paying attention? No. It's clear. Why sit front row if you're not going to pay attention? You paying attention, Julia? You were not. That's the problem. I told you, I think you're paying attention, but somehow or other you... Yeah, still, you grew up speaking English. You know. Are you ashamed of yourself? You totally missed it, right? Super important. You feel foolish as an accountant? You should know this stuff, right? Mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive when you're talking about systems of categorization. That means everything should fit into one and exactly one category, and there should be no overlap between those categories. And when you get all your categories put together, you should have explained the entire phenomenon. For instance, in yoga, yogasana, you have standing poses and sitting poses. Is that comprehensively exhaustive?
Lying down pose.
That would be sitting. Sitting would include lying down. Sitting means your butt is on the ground. Anything where your butt's on the ground counts as sitting, even if while you're sitting down, your head is on the ground as well. Standing and sitting poses. Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah, that works. Comprehensively exhaustive. Are they mutually exclusive? Yeah, pretty much. The more detailed you want to get, the more essential it is that you have mutually exclusive categories and they're comprehensively exhaustive, and then you've categorized a phenomenon, whatever that might be, a thing, whatever that thing might be. I brought this up in relationship to the 3 sections of the Gita. Karma, Bhakti, Jnana. First 6, middle 6, last 6 chapters. And I said that you should not view these as mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive. It's cool. You should not view these as mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive categories. Why should you not view these 3 categories and ways of categorizing the Gita that are given by our acharyas over the last 1,500 years? Why should you not consider them to be mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive? Yes?
They're not mutually exclusive because it's like a ladder where jnana and karma are leading towards bhakti.
They're not mutually exclusive because karma and jnana are ladders that lead to bhakti. I disagree with you, because if karma and jnana were discrete categories that eventually led to another discrete category called bhakti, you could certainly call them discrete categories. The fact that those categories have some relationship to one another, it's not that the categories can have no relationship to one another. It's that things in one category don't fit into another category. So I disagree with you. But at least you're listening. At least you gave me a wrong answer to my actual question. That's like that required, more than just repeating my question. That counts. What were we going to say?
I was going to say they're not mutually exclusive because there's overlap between the 3 sections.
Like, give me an example of what you mean when you say there's overlap between the 3 sections.
Yeah, like in the karma section, there's some alluding to bhakti.
There's tons of bhakti and jnana in the karma section. In fact, there's chapters in the first 6 chapters that talk about the difference between jnana and karma. It's like, Buddhi Yoga is Gyan and karma mixed together. Sankhya is Gyan. Krishna literally says, Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam, the Jnana Yoga of the Sankhyas. He talks about Jnana Maya Yagna, the yagya comprised of jnana. He talks about the difference between sannyas and yoga. The first 6 chapters are filled with all sorts of verses. Gyan must have been mentioned 50 times in the first 6 chapters. And bhakti comes up in every single chapter. So these couldn't possibly be discrete chapters, because we find bhakti all over the first 6 chapters. That is until we read the second 6 chapters. We think bhakti's all over the first 6 chapters because there are bhakti verses in every chapter. But now we're going to encounter big sections on bhakti in every chapter. Multiple verses on bhakti in every chapter. Further exploration of bhakti in every chapter. Now, why should we say that karma, jnana, and bhakti is not comprehensively exhaustive? I don't know. There might be other topics talked about in the Gita. How about dharma, for example? How about jati dharma, kula dharma? There's all sorts of stuff. We can say, well, that's a type of gyan, that's a type of knowledge. Fair enough, but now everything's a type of knowledge. So there are certainly other topics that are dealt with in the Gita besides karma, jnana, and bhakti. Which soldiers stood on which side of the battlefield? The names of the soldiers, for example. All sorts of stuff that doesn't easily cram into karma, jnana, and bhakti. Well, it's a type of knowledge. Yeah, it's just like you're really stretching. Then karma becomes a type of knowledge of how to act. And bhakti becomes a type of knowledge of your relationship with Krishna. And everything becomes a type of knowledge. In fact, bhakti does require some knowledge. Krishna's God. Bhakti does require some karma. You do acts of devotional service. But because they're infused with devotion for Krishna, then those acts of karma and jnana are no longer called karma and jnana. They're called bhakti. So, additionally, how about things like prem? Gopi prem. There are topics which are not covered in the Gita. In fact, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was having the Gita quoted to him, he kept saying, Eho bahya age kahar. That these things are external, tell me something more. And Ramanand Roy, the speaker of this conversation, when Mahaprabhu was asking questions, he had to go to Bhagavatam in order to satisfy Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Eventually he had to go beyond the Bhagavatam and read his own poetry in order to satisfy Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Eventually Mahaprabhu kept asking for more. Eho hoy, ago kahayar, age kahar. That is good. Can you speak something further? Is there something further? And then eventually Ramananda Roy read his own poetry. You're okay. Just work. Just do something. You're not, do you really not have the ability to keep her quiet? Ever? You guys should work on this. I can always keep my kids quiet since they were children. Since they're like 1 year old. Keep my kids quiet. I practice at home. You guys got to be less permissive of your kids screaming bloody murder at home, and you'll be able to control them more in other spaces. So it could be argued that there are things that exist in relationship to bhakti which are not in the Gita. So it might comprehensively exhaust the entire Gita. And then alternatively, there are subjects in the Gita which are not covered by the karma, jnana, and bhakti thing. You might be able to fit them in. Dharma fits under karma. You might be able to do some stuff like that. But I don't think it's a shoo-in. I don't think it's for sure. That comprehensively exhaustive is a lot less important to me. The main point I wanted to make is it's not mutually exclusive. Don't leave. Stay. The main point I wanted to make was it's not mutually exclusive. And that's important because otherwise when you find jnana verses that deal with jnana in the 7th chapter, 8th chapter, 9th chapter, you'll get confused. But if you understand that these are loose categories which are introduced as a didactic tool to help you just kind of break up the Gita and understand something of its structure, then they become incredibly useful. Have we strayed too far out of Arjuna's task of having to fight in a battle in the first 6 chapters? We have not. Have we mainly focused on duty? We have. We have. We've mainly focused on this idea of doing your duty but being unattached. We haven't encountered big, long philosophical lists. Maybe a little bit in like when Sankhya was being taught, it got a little philosophical in there for a minute. But we didn't get these big monster, lists of philosophy like we're going to find in the last 6 chapters. Like for instance, the 14th chapter is an exploration of the gunas. A whole chapter about the gunas. The 13th chapter is dedicated to distinguishing Prakriti and Purusha, spirit and matter. You get this kind of stuff. And the 16th chapter is about good and bad qualities. The 17th chapter starts to categorize, charity and austerity and food into the 3 modes and shows you how to use that information about the gunas but there's just a lot of philosophy in those last 6 chapters. So there's something to be said about, oh yeah, those last 6 are more jnana. These middle 6 are more bhakti. The first 6 are more karma. But you shouldn't see them as hard categories. Why is this important for us to talk about tonight? Yeah.
We're going to the second.
Yeah. We're starting the 7th chapter. We're on verse 1 of the 7th chapter. So we're in the second set of 6 chapters in breaking up the Gita into helping you understand it. And these types of frameworks, you ultimately don't need them. What you need to do is be able to ask yourself, what's Krishna trying to say here? What question by Arjuna is Krishna trying to answer? How is this statement by Krishna different than other statements Krishna's made, which are similar? How is his teaching evolving? How does this practically apply to my life? What's actually being communicated here? And the truth is, without basic reading comprehension skills, you're going to have a hard time. I guess theoretically you could just, bhakti could manifest the truth in your heart, but then you'd be ignorant, you'd be able to answer my questions. If you're ignorant and you can't answer my questions, it means bhakti hasn't manifested the answer in your heart, in which case you're going to have to just go ahead and work for your degree and not expect an honorary degree to be granted to you, which anyway doesn't count for anything. Honorary degrees are just that. They don't help you get a job in that field or anything like that. They're just a freebie. They don't mean a whole lot. All right. Without further ado. Mai asakta manaparta yogam yunjam madashraya asangshayam samagramam yata yasyasi tatshrinu. 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 Listen to this. Hear this. Hear what? Hear about how mai asakta manaha, by your mind attached to me. Mai means to me. Yoga yunjam, yoking yourself to yoga. Madashraya, taking shelter of me. Asangshayam samagramam yata yasyasi. You will know me completely without any doubt. Tatshrinu, hear from me. How? Yata, how? Mai asakta manaha, with your mind attached to me. Yoga yunjan, practicing yoga. Madashraya, taking shelter of me. Asangshayam samagram mam gyasyasi. Gyasyasi is the same root gya for gyan. Gyasyasi means you will know. Second person, future tense. You will know me. Samagram, completely. Asangshayam, without doubt. What do you guys think about this verse? What sticks out to you in this verse? Dom. By the way, you don't want to go after Dom. Dom generally is more educated in our tradition than any of you. As such, he's got the highest probability of answering the question, in which case you're going to have a harder time answering the question. He's the last guy you want to go after. You want to go before Dom. That way he goes, oh, I was going to say the same thing. And you're like, yes. But otherwise, afterwards, when you're like, I was going to say the same thing, it's like, yeah, I don't buy it. Everyone wants to get in before Dom. What strikes you in this verse? Yes?
Well, in this verse, you mentioned that you completely free from doubt.
All right, free from doubt. That's kind of a cool thing. Kind of a cool thing, sure. I mean, the way you're answering the question is, this, I feel this, or this like means something to me. You pick out one word, and you're like, I feel that, I'm feeling that. I'm thinking structurally, what do you notice? In relationship to it being the 7th chapter, what do you notice? In relationship to bhakti, what do you notice? In relation to something new that hasn't been said before, what do you notice? I'm looking for structural stuff. Big stuff. Dalen, you got something?
Well, I mean, I think he's saying.
See, you think you're smart, right? But you're not. You're not. You're a good talker. You're charismatic. You're good looking. I'll give you all that. But you're not that smart. You haven't learned how to read a book. You haven't learned how to study something and sit down. You got that ADHD. You're always bored. You're always moving around from one topic to another. You have a hard time just sitting down and hunkering down and putting in 6, 8, 10 hours of good old-fashioned study time, right? Have your whole lifetime, right? You got too much testosterone. Males do poor in school across the board. Because you're jumping around, because of suboptimal arousal. But you got to learn. You got to learn. You got to learn how to focus and see stuff and look. And not just, just go on your charisma and your speaking ability. You get it? You have to learn to penetrate the text, and it requires focus. Yes, sir.
Sometimes if we're not able to if we don't know the full story of what's going on, or we're not able to process what's going on, we just go with our gut instinct. And a lot of times that's the right one. But where does our gut instinct come from? Does it come from past lifetimes?
That's a great question. Could come from anywhere. Could come from what you ate for lunch. Seriously. It affects your mind. What you ate. You have a ton of neural connections in your stomach. And what you eat goes to your brain and affects the way you think. Your gut feeling could be just the worst feeling ever. People go and buy crack based on a gut feeling that they need to get high. People sleep around and get AIDS based on a gut feeling they need to sleep around. People get all sorts of terrible gut feelings that are really bad for them. How about people have a gut feeling they need to punch somebody in the face? All sorts of awful gut feelings you have that you should not follow. Sometimes you can have a good intuitive feeling, but you can always have a bad intuitive feeling. So usually the best thing is you have to logically work through stuff. And maybe your gut can confirm that for you. Madan, jump up there and go unplug the water dispenser. All right, what do we got? Give me some answers. What do you notice? Hidden.
So previously in Gita, Krishna said, thinking of me, doing things, thinking of me. Now he's saying, you'll know me.
All right, you'll know me. Sure, that could be an evolution. We have to go back to the first 6 chapters and see if there was a place where he said, you'll know me. I think there's not. I think it's the first instance of Krishna saying, you'll know me. I think you might be right. I didn't notice that. I'm impressed. It was a good one. I'd have to go back and look at the concordance to see if there was anything said like that. But I don't, what is it? Mam veti tattvataha, you'll know me in truth. 4th chapter. He uses the word veti to mean you'll know me. Same vid, to know, ya, to know, same word. Different word, but same principle. Nope, you failed. You're impressed by that, right, Tom? That's the other one, right? What is it? Mayi sanyasya adhyatma chetasa. Mayi sarvani. Okay, that's all your works dedicated to me. Okay, my bad. So, but anyway, there's at least one place where he says you'll know me. Who else? Yeah.
This is not the first time this has occurred, but in this verse, there's some reciprocity where Krishna said
that in multiple other places. As much as you surrender to me, I reward you. You'll never be lost to me. I'll never be lost to you. That's happened multiple times, even more poetically than in this verse. More poetically than in this verse. Yeah.
He's kind of
By the way, you guys, I'm happy with this. Now you guys are giving me something to work with here. Whether you're right or wrong, I don't care. You're thinking, you're looking for stuff, you're seeing stuff, you're exploring stuff. These are A's. Whether you get the right answer or not, irrelevant. These are A's. You guys are taking your shot, and they're good shots. They're solid shots. I'm having to think.
It seems like Krishna's expanding the definition and the goal of yoga to know him in this verse.
That's a nice one. That was in the last verse he mentioned that, right? Those who are dedicated to me, right? And that last verse would then be seen as some kind of connector between the first 6 chapters and the second 6 chapters, and it's being also equally stated here. That's starting to get like, that's like delectable. That's like a good one. What do you think, Dom? No. Based on what he said. You weren't listening to him. You were thinking about your own thing. You weren't listening to him. Yeah, I know. You weren't listening to him. You gotta learn to listen to other people and not just think about what you want to say. It's tough. But you gotta do it. That's a good one. I like that one. You got something good?
Yes.
Lay it on me. All right.
Well, up to now, Krishna has hinted at bhakti as completing all the other forms of yoga. So
Yeah.
It seems like the first time he's presenting bhakti in like a full form.
Yeah, I mean, mud ashraya, taking shelter of me. Right?
Yeah.
Budhau sharanam anvicha. Try to resort to buddhi, he says in the 2nd chapter. But here he directly says, mad ashraya. Taking shelter of me. How did you guys miss that one? It's screaming at you. That's like heavy bhakti. Your mind absorbed in me, taking shelter of me. You'll know me. 3 times me. Your mind absorbed in me. Take shelter of me, and you will know me. That's starting to get real focused on himself. Certainly there is no place in the first 6 chapters of the Gita where Krishna mentions himself 3 times. Maybe we got it twice. But this is big. And taking shelter of me, thinking of me, and knowing me. Completely. How about that completely thing? You said without a doubt. How about the completely thing? You'll fully know me. He certainly hadn't said that before. Actually, he did say, Mam veti tatvata. You'll know me in truth. Which sounds like you'll know me completely. But it's like we're now, we're having to look through the entire first 6 chapters for little bits and pieces. And now we got him mentioning himself as the focal point of your yoga 3 times. And it will lead you to knowing him completely without any doubts. This is big. It's a whole different feeling than all the other verses that we've gotten so far. It's so in your face bhakti-esque. It's so in your face bhakti-esque. And additionally, it's got a ton of stuff on him. And it's got these like almost hyperbolics completely without any doubt. How about the touch Shrinu? Listen to me. He's getting more comfortable. He's just giving us instruction. Now he's like, we're done with like, if you do this, you'll get this. And he's like, listen to me. It's not that he hasn't said that before. Tadvidhi, know this. He said that before. But now it's more. And it's the first verse. It's a harbinger of what's to come. It's a herald of what's to come. We know now we're dealing with a very, this feels way more like bhakti. Do you guys see it now? Do you all feel kind of ignorant because you missed all that? It's okay, because now your brains were turned on, you were struggling, and now the answer comes, and now you'll see it. And if you get this, you'll be able to see it with the next verse and the next verse. You have to learn to look at the verses. There's stuff there. There's favorable stuff there. They want you to understand them. They're formulaic. They present you with information. You can get it. It's there. It's waiting for you. You just got to learn the system, and then you got to go back, and you got to do it again. Just like any other subject you want to master. You watch someone do it right, you learn from them, and then you try yourself. But the act of you guys turning your brains on and trying means the answers will stick and you'll get it. You gotta raise your hand more and speak more. Oh, let's read Prabhupada's expert translation here. Sorry. Now hear how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Super clean translation. Jnanam teham savigyanam idam vakshami asheshata. I will speak. I will speak. Vakshami. I will speak. Asheshata. Fully. Jnanam. Knowledge. Te aham. I will speak to you. Vakshami means I will speak. But aham vakshami means I will speak. Vakshami by itself, without any subject, means I will speak. But if you say aham vakshami, it literally is I will speak. It's the verb, but the verb implies the subject. And in Sanskrit, you don't have to say I will speak. You can. The verb says if it's the first person speaking. Does that make sense? You will speak, they will speak, he will speak, she will speak. In Sanskrit, you conjugate the verb, and it means is it he will speak, or they will speak, or I will speak. You follow? I will speak. Te, to you. Jnanam, knowledge. Savigyanam, and vigyan. What does vigyan mean?
Wisdom or practical.
Special knowledge. V modifies Gyan, so Vigyan means special knowledge. And then it's up to you how you want to make it. You follow? You get to decide what that means. Jnana Vigyana. Knowledge, special knowledge. So it could be, theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. Could be knowledge and wisdom. Could be theory and realization. Could be general and specific knowledge. It's up to you. You can look at the context too and get a sense. Jnanam teham savigyanam idam vakshami asheshita. I will speak knowledge to you and special knowledge in full. Asheshita means fully. Shesha means remainder. Asheshita means without remainder, meaning in full, complete. Yad yatva nehabuyo anyat gyatavyam avishishyati. And now, one who knows this, there will not remain any further knowledge to be known. One who knows this, yatva, having known this, neha buyo anyat, another knowledge again in this world, gyatavam, that to be known, avishishati, there will not remain anything to be left to be known in this world. Literally, there will not remain anything left to be known in this world, is what Krishna is saying. Which is far out, right? Hear that whole comprehensively exhausted thing? He's making a claim here, right? There will remain nothing left to be known in this world. Far out, right? I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. Phenomenal and numinous. Numinous. Numinous comes from numen, comes from nous. What does nous mean? So we get the word noetic from. A bunch of words you don't know. Nous means mind. These words are René Descartes' words. René Descartes, the famous French philosopher, spoke of the phenomenal world is the material world, the world of matter, and the noumenal world, the world of mind. Mind-body dichotomy, the mind-body distinction. This is the language that was used by René Descartes. Phenomenal and noumenal. Prabhupada swaps out for numinous. What is Prabhupada translating with the word phenomenal? This knowledge that is both phenomenal and numinous. What is Prabhupada translating that as? What's he translating from Sanskrit? Yeah. So Prabhupada's choosing to say material and spiritual knowledge. You get it? That's what he's doing. But noumenal would mean mental knowledge, but we make a distinction between the mind and spirit. We consider the mind to be material, spirit to be spiritual. So Prabhupada switches the word noumenal and makes it numinous to indicate it's not exactly Cartesian. Says Krishna's not exactly a follower of René Descartes. Because technically the phenomenal world for us includes mind. And the numinous world, that is the world of soul. And so Prabhupada thinks vijnana here means spiritual and jnana means material. And different people could take it different ways. There's a lot of support for Prabhupada's reading in the subsequent verses of the Gita where Krishna explains the material world and the spiritual world in relation to one another, that's what Krishna was intending by jnana and vijnana. Again, you have to look for the context to know what's intended. You could pick some other thing, what jnana and vijnana means, but this is a good one. It sounds a little biblical, doesn't it? Listen. I shall now declare unto you, right? It sounds slightly biblical, doesn't it? Like a little King James-ish, right? In full, the knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatanam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvataha. Manushyanam sahasreshu, out of thousands of men, kaschit yatati siddhaye, someone will strive for perfection. Yatati, they will strive. That's where you get the word yati from, which is another word for a sannyasi. They're called a yati. Not yeti, that's a snowman. That's an abominable snowman. Yati means a sannyasi. It's another Sanskrit term for a sannyasi. Yatati, he strives. Siddhaye, for siddha, for perfection. Yatanam api siddhanam, and of those strivers and even of those perfected ones, kaschin mam veti tatvata, someone knows me in truth. This kaschit, someone, is used in Sanskrit to mean maybe one person, perhaps a single person. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. That's the feeling of the verse. What's this verse have to do? Why is this verse in here? Yeah.
I could be wrong, but considering right now.
You are correct. You could be wrong, and you should pretty much just not say that because that's always the case.
But I feel like, well, now that we are in the realm of defining bhakti completely, like, is he introducing the aspect of surrender versus the other?
It would certainly seem that knowing him is beyond achieving perfection, as it's commonly understood. It's a special type of perfection, which takes you beyond normal Vedic perfection. That is certainly a strong feature of the verse. That does not explain why this verse is here. At least, not the way you phrased it. But it does unpack the verse, which is great. I appreciate that. Why is this verse nestled in here? Sure. Even more specific than how special it is to know him. What's Krishna telling you how special it is? What? Yes.
This knowledge.
What he's going to teach us right now is so special. Listen. You see, you were on the right track, but it was a little loose, right? It was a little loose, right? Krishna's saying, hey, listen up. This is like really good stuff I'm telling you. Like thousands of sannyasis. Out of thousands of people, one might become a sannyasi or a striver or try for perfection. Out of thousands of them, or even out of thousands of people who actually achieve perfection, maybe there's one person who actually knows me, and I'm going to tell you about myself now. So this is special. And once you know this, there's nothing left to know. I mean, imagine somebody said it to you. Hey, I'm going to teach you how to fix a car. And once you finish my 1 hour tutorial on how to fix a car, there will remain nothing left about cars for you to ever learn. It's no joke. It's big. Right? You're going to have to take shelter of me. Right? You have to think about me. Right? And then the goal is to know me. And and you'll be able to know me fully, without any doubts. And once you know what I'm about to teach you, which is about me, because I told you that already, but once you know what I'm about to teach you, from all sides, jnanam savijnanam, with knowledge and special knowledge, once you know that, there's nothing left to know in this world. And that knowledge is about me. And this is special. How special? 1 out of 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000. That's 1 billion. That's like 7 people in today's world. At the time of the Gita was spoken, I don't imagine there was even 1 billion people on the planet. It's like 1 person on the planet. Because 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000. Out of 1,000, it's not even just 1,000. Out of thousands of men, that could be 100,000. One striving, and then out of those strivers, maybe one of them achieves perfection, and out of those people who achieve perfection, one of them knows me in truth. You get it? It's orders of magnitude, right? It's special. That's the feeling. Don't take it lightly. Listen up. Listen carefully. When I ask, why is this verse here? You always want to, as specifically as possible, link it to the chapter, to the verses we're looking at. Sometimes you'll journal and send me your journal. And if there's something which doesn't fit with your journal, I'll read it 3 or 4 times, then I'll call you up and go, why did you include this sentence? And you'll be like, I was thinking about this, I thought about that, and I'll ask. If there's a sentence, just when I'm just texting somebody, when I'm just texting another mortal, if they write something which doesn't fit, I become disturbed. Shri's sighing because her brain is like Swiss cheese, and that makes no sense when she texts. Dalen and Shri are like soulmates, they're twin flames, kindred spirits. I just realized that soulmate thing came from Greek mythology. It was thought that people had 2 faces and 4 hands and 4 legs, but they got too egotistical, and so then the gods cut them in half, and then they wandered the world looking for their soulmate. I read this recently online. I actually have to look it up, because who knows if that's true. You read online, it's almost guaranteed to be false. But that's what this idea of a soulmate came from. Who knows if that's actually true or not. But anyway, there you go. So, if there are soulmates, you guys are them. Both of you could make sense if your life depended on it. But you got to approach the text like this. It makes perfect sense. Krishna's got a message. Everything he says makes sense. I have to discover how it makes sense. So you showed you were smart, and you gave a reason why it would be valuable, but you didn't directly relate it to the chapter. You follow? You always have to be going for gold, relating it to the section of verses in the chapter we're looking at. Does that make sense? And you got to take more risks and raise your hand more. You. This, by the way, doesn't sound biblical. This sounds Vedic. Listen to this. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Do you feel it's very dispassionate, and it's very informative, and it's talking about like large amounts of information, distilling it down. It's very philosophical. It's like Sanskrit literature. It's nice. It's got a real Vedic feel to it. As much as the other verse has a little bit of the King James feel. I shall now declare unto you the highest of the high and the truest of the true. Okay, now this is a wild verse. This is a wild verse. Bhumi apo anala vayu kam mano buddhir evacha. Earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence. Ahankara. Itiyame bhina prakritir ashtada. And ego. False ego. These are my separated eightfold energies. These are my separated eightfold energy. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energy. Bhina prakriti, mam. My separated energy. Ashtada, eightfold. Earth, water, fire, air, space. Mind, intelligence, ego. These 8 together constitute my separated energies. What's this verse doing here? Yes?
It's breaking down the luminal and the phenomenal world.
It certainly supports Prabhupada's translation of jnana and vijnana as phenomenal and numinous, material and spiritual, and this verse would be about the material. Right? Okay. You see that? See how important it is we notice that in the last verses so we could appreciate this verse? More things in this verse that are interesting. Yes?
He's certainly presenting his case for him being the only one who can deliver this knowledge, because he controls everything we know to exist phenomenally.
These energies are Krishna's. That makes him God. That makes him the source of all existence. That makes him the source of the world in which we live. That would make sense now why by knowing him we would know everything, because we know that thing from which everything else came. Excellent. That's right there. It's low-hanging fruit. It's obvious. Anything else in these verses? Yes?
The word bhinna, or separated.
Bhinna means separated. It's a super important word. That's what I was thinking too. Tell me why it's important.
He's explaining his relationship with this world.
He is separating himself from this world. It's my energy, me prakriti. It's my energy, but it's bhina. It's separated from me. You follow? That's important. That's important. That God is not merely the material world. If God is merely the material world, then you're pantheistic. If God's merely the material world, then God is faulty and dies and is subject to fundamental forces. You follow? If God's merely transcendent, this world has nothing to do with God. You have to die to get anywhere. Atheists have a hard time explaining consciousness. Why? Because their starting place is matter, and consciousness cannot be well explained as derivative of matter. Spiritualists, on the other hand, have a hard time explaining the material world. Why? Because everything comes from God, who's spiritual. But the material world is material. It's hard to explain how matter comes from spirit. It's critical for spiritualists, theists, to separate God from the materialism of the world. But not so much so that the world doesn't come from God. And so there's a little bit of a razor's edge. It's my energy, but it's my separated energy. It comes from me, but it's divorced from me. Mayadhyakshena prakriti. I'm overseeing material nature. Udasinavat, but I'm seated indifferently. You follow? This kind of language, this is very Vedanta. This is very Vedic. It's like push-pull. I am this, I'm not this. I'm here, I'm there. And it lets you know it's not just one or the other. You guys following this? Good. More. Okay. Yes, Drew.
I'm not sure this happened earlier in the Gita, but Krishna makes the point that more than just the physical world we can see and touch is part of the material energy.
Yeah, right. I talked about this earlier, but mind, intelligence, and ego are part of his material energy. Therefore, it's not just mind and body. It's mind and body in one category, and then soul in another. And we categorize mind, intelligence, ego as being material. And they're in the matter bucket. And consciousness, pure consciousness, is in the spirit bucket. Therefore, it's a three-part system. Mind, body, and soul. And you have to break those three into two categories. Mind and body are in the same category. And soul's in its own category. For sure. And it's very Vedic. It's very standardly understood that you are not your mind. You can watch your thoughts, which is elegant proof that you are not your thoughts. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to watch them because you would be them. And so this is very much the paradigm of the Gita, and it's obvious just by looking at the verse. Yes?
The idea of a false ego implies that there's a true ego.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Ahankara literally means I am the doer. So translate however you want. Ego, false ego, whatever. Some people think ego means false ego. But there is a nature of the self. Independent. That you have a nature. We could call that a pure ego, or a spiritual ego, or a spiritual sense of self, or a spiritual identity, or an eternal dharma. You can call it by any other name. What's critical is that you understand what you're saying. So we like the term false ego. Prabhupada liked that term. We like that term. So we talk about false ego versus real ego. I remember when I was 16, I was reading the Gita. I went to the temple and I go, Prabhupada's talking about a false ego, but all ego is false. And they said to me, no, there's a real you. There's a real you beyond the false you. However, you could just as easily say, beyond the ego, there's a real sense of self. There's a real self beyond the ego. You can pick what language you want to use to convey that. But there's a false sense of self, and there's a real sense of self. You can call it this. The problem is ego in English goes back to Freudian psychoanalytic theory, and it is definitively material, the way we use it nowadays, right? The way ego is used in a psychological context, right? Obviously the word ego predates Freud, he didn't coin the term, but the way he used it, is the way it's now used most often. And usually when people say, that was my ego talking, we don't go, was that your false ego or your real ego? We just know they mean my false ego. You follow? So it's important to understand the concept. Then whether we give it the name false ego or real ego, or we give the name ego and spiritual self, it doesn't matter. You play with those terms depending on your audience. but there's a point you're conveying. There's a real you. You exist. There's a real you. Right? Excellent. Good stuff. All right. Aparayam itas tu anyam prakritim vidhi me padam. So, other than this inferior prakriti, know that there is a superior energy of mind. Besides this inferior, know that there is a superior energy. Prakritim param. Prakriti paran. Prakriti param. Me. My supreme energy. Vidhi, know this. Anyam, too, but another. Itas, than this. Aparayam, inferior one. There is a superior one. Jiva bhuto mahabaho yaya idam dharyate jagat. The jiva beings, the living beings, yaya idam dharyate jagat, by which this world is upheld, is maintained. But other than this inferior energy, know that there is my supreme energy of the living beings who uplift or uphold or maintain or carry this world or utilize this world. What's Krishna saying here? I'm giving you a literal translation, but you should dumb this down now into plain English. What's Krishna saying?
Krishna's saying that aside from the separated energies, he's the main source of energy.
Okay? No. But at least you're in the game, you get an A. Because you never say nothing, and I called on you, and you just jumped right in. So you get an A for effort. What's Krishna saying, Julia? It's okay. I'll take the What's Krishna saying? Open to everybody. Go. Hitin, yes.
He's explaining these energies, and there's a hierarchy of those energies.
Okay. What is that hierarchy?
That the material energy we talk about is inferior.
You're killing me here. It's so simple what Krishna's saying. If you can't say this super simply, don't raise your hand. Raise your hand if you could say it incredibly simply, ridiculously simply. I believe all of you. Anybody else can say it super simply? All right, Madan, you go. You know why you're going? No, because I think Drew for sure can get it, and Don can for sure get it, and I think Shri can for sure get it, and I think you're the least likely to be able to get it, so I'm testing you. And if you'd raise your hand, I would have called on you. Go.
We're in this world, but not of this world. We're made of Krishna's superior energy.
How about this? There's matter, which I just described, and then there's spirit. And spirit is all of us, all life. And we animate this world, but we are categorically different than this world. It's a simple philosophical point he's making, isn't it? The living beings are maintaining this world, exploring this world, exploiting this world, uplifting this world, animating this world. But they're not of this world. They're a different type of energy. They're also my energy. They're me prakriti. They're my energy. But they're param prakriti, my supreme energy, versus bina prakriti, my separated energy. We're more like Krishna. We're spiritual. And so the world can ultimately be broken down to two things. What are those two things? And so he's repeating the same thing he said in the first 6 chapters. It was the first teaching of the first 6 chapters was this. And that's the first teaching of the second 6 chapters, but it's in a heck of a lot more detail. Guess what happens in the 13th chapter, which is the first chapter of the last 6 chapters? He goes over exactly the same information in even more detail. How cool is that?
Super cool.
Never thought of that, right? I never thought of it either. I just thought of it right now because I'm on fire, making magic happen right now. Each of the 3 sections, the first thing Krishna starts off with is an ontology. In the beginning, it's spirit and matter. Now it's 8 forms of matter. And then it's going to be 20 forms of matter. Each set, he starts off by telling you what is, which then gives you a foundation to then build on what he's going to teach about what is. I mean, this is wild. Krishna just in 2 verses explained the entire material. He explained the entire world. Living beings who are exploiting a world made out of matter, which can be broken down to earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. It might not be a periodic chart of the elements. It might not be some kind of a quantum physics, but it's certainly a simple, old world way of understanding spirit in matter in a very practical way, a very almost scientific way. It might be primitive compared to, let's say, what happens when you look at the world through a microscope. But it's very philosophically astute. And in fact, this worldview holds up just fine in 2023. That you, as a conscious living being, are different than the material world in which you have it, in which you are currently inhabiting. And that idea is just as profound today as it was when Krishna came up with it. And we'll do one more just because they're beautiful verses. Also because we need to do one more to wrap this chapter up. Besides these, there's another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploring the resources of this material inferior nature. Etat yonini bhutani savaniti upadaya. Know that all that is created has these 2 sources of its birth. It comes from these 2 wombs. Know that understand, upadaya means understand, that everything, sarva, everything that exists, comes from these 2 wombs. Know that everything that exists comes from these 2 wombs. Aham kritsnasya jagata prabhava pralayastata. I am the source and dissolution, the complete source and dissolution of everything in this world. I am the complete source and annihilation of this world. Everything exists. I'm its source, and I'm its beginning and its end. Mata parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananja. There is nothing beyond me. Mayi sarvamidam protam sutre manigana iva. Everything is strung on me like pearls are strung on a thread. Everything depends on me. Everything rests on me like pearls on a thread. Krishna finishes with a brilliant analogy to explain his relationship to the world as the substratum or the support of this world. All created beings have their source in these 2 natures. Yeah, it actually says all beings have their source in these 2 natures, are from these 2 wombs. In other words, you have a material body and you have yourself. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. There is no truth to me, superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So Krishna starts off and says, hey, I'm going to tell you, if you take shelter of me, if you think of me, you can know me without any doubt completely. Having known that, there will be nothing further to be known, and I'm about to tell you Gyan and Vigyan together. Out of thousands of people, one might strive for perfection. Out of thousands of those strivers, and of the people who then eventually achieve perfection, one might know me in truth. So this is really important. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, those are my bina prakriti. But I have another superior nature, which is comprised of all of us, all of you. And you are actually animated in this world and utilized in this world, but you're not of this world. All beings are from these two wombs, your body and yourself. I'm the source of everything you see. And its dissolution too. The alpha and the omega. There's no truth beyond me. Everything's strung on me like pearls are strung on a thread. And in these beginning verses we get an ontology, a continuation of the second chapter of the Gita. It's way more devotional. We're getting way more devotional ideas. Everything's being directly connected to Krishna. It's not like spirit and matter exists. It's like they're coming from me. These are my energies. It's just way more devotional. It's way more theistic. We're getting a theistic ontology where everything then reminds you of God, is reminiscent of God, and can help you to feel God's presence, because now you live in a world, not just of spirit and matter, but in a world where God is behind everything. Which is important for a bhakta. And so we're getting set up with an updated ontology from the second chapter, which is appropriate for devotees who are cultivating devotion. And Krishna's like, I mean, they're actually brilliant verses. I mean, think about how much ground we've covered in the first 7 verses. It's an incredible amount of ground we've covered. Like, we're off to the races. I mean, if you just had these 7 verses as your entire text, it's like, you know what I mean? These 7 verses as a whole text, as a whole religion, right? You're doing pretty good. You got a pretty solid religious textual tradition. That's it. You could get to bhakti from this. You could get to questions like, well, what happens if you go beyond this world? Can spirit ever exist in relationship to itself? Is it possible to directly relate to Krishna and not just relate to this material world? Like, natural questions come out of you just meditating on these verses. And we're just, it's like you're shot out of a cannon in these next 6 chapters. Big stuff, big ideas, devotional ideas. Thank you, IGTV. All right, give me some feedback, guys. Yep.